bottom part of the screen.
I know how to mute myself. I just didn't know we were doing that.
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad that you're here to join us this morning. We're going to give another minute or so for a few other folks to get on as people are kind of jumping on Facebook and YouTube Live. So we'll give that just about a minute, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Can see a few people on there already. A little yo from Woodbury Lutheran Church. We got a yo, guys. So that's exciting. Glad you guys are with us. As you can see, we are all doing what most of you are probably doing, which is working from random rooms in our houses, or maybe a home office if you've managed to finagle one of those. I think Phil has a real office, like an actual professional, but most of the rest of us are somewhere in our house attempting to figure out how to do church in a whole new way. So I'm glad that you guys are with us to join us for this conversation. Really, as Adam and Phil and I have had some conversations just kind of back and forth personally about things we're trying to do with our churches and the people that we serve, we kind of said, hey, these are conversations I'm having over here, and these are conversations I'm having over here. How can we bring some folks together as we're all trying to figure out how to do this new thing, I guess you could say. So this is kind of our first webinar. We're going to try and see how this goes, but our goal really for today is to talk about what does this look like to be doing church, live streaming, teamwork, worship leading. What does it look like to do that right now? And the reality is that we all know that this is not just right now. There's going to be some phases coming out of this for us. What does it look like for the future? How does right now impact the future? And we'll talk about those, I think, in a couple of future webisodes. But for today, I'm going to kind of zero in on this idea of right now. Now, before we do that, most of you probably know one of us, and that's how you ended up here. And so you probably don't know all of us. So why don't we go ahead and introduce ourselves? I'll go first. My name is Leah Abel, and I am a person who works with people and plans for a living, which has made this whole quarantine thing a little complicated. I am the sole member of the team of Abel Project Management and Facilitation, and so I help facilitate meetings and events for folks. And so that's kind of what I do. And I come at this from a planner's eyes and also from a church member's eyes who's trying to be a volunteer in this. So that's kind of who I am and where I'm coming from. Adam and Phil, do you want to chime in here and tell the folks who you are and why you're here?
Go ahead, Adam.
Just for point of reference, I know my mic was unmuted, you guys. You don't have to keep commenting about it in the comments. Like, I get it. I know where the button is now. It's fine. Just let it go. Anyway, geez, talking about being online and quality. Okay, fine. So my name is Adam Countryman. I'm the, what do I do? I'm the Director of Worship Arts at Concordia in San Antonio. I see some of my team is on here. Hi, guys. And we're in the midst of all this with you guys doing the same kind of deal. I met Phil and Leah at the National Youth Gathering, I think in 2010 or something like that, 2013. So we've been trying to get together and do some stuff all the time. So that's what we're doing. And we're looking forward to this and having this conversation with you guys and talking about where we are and what do we do next.
My name is Phil Grimpo. I'm with Inspire Media Productions. I worked as the media director at Christ in Lincoln for a couple of years. And then I started Inspire Media about 20 years ago to work with churches across the country. And now with COVID, we're back to doing that a lot. And I've been working a lot with Leah and Adam. I work with them with the gathering and then with their churches as well. And we've been doing live event production for years. So you can imagine that COVID kind of shut all that down. So it's been really great to be able to be working pretty well full time with churches and getting everybody up and streaming. Lots of technology questions. So that's kind of my role, is to talk about the technology piece of all this.
Yeah. So we're going to, if those of you kind of looked at our invitation, we're going to hit on a few different things today as far as where the church is at right now and how do we do this a little bit better. Phil's going to share from his perspective some tech things that will be helpful for you to be aware of and to know just to do it better. Adam's going to share some hospitality and worship stuff. How do you do hospitality from a video screen? But he's got some pretty decent insights despite his.
Don't be so surprised. You're so shocked.
I know. And then I'm going to share a bit about how do you do virtual teamwork? What does that look like? And I don't mean like teamwork, team building activities. I mean, like, how do you get all these ideas, these great ideas? How do you get them done when you're not able to be together? So that's kind of where I'm going to share from. I want to let you know that if you've got questions or you've got comments you want to share, you can share those straight through Facebook if you're watching us there. If you're on YouTube, just put them in the comments section. What we'll do is kind of respond to those as we can, as we get a little bit farther into our conversation, maybe at the end of it. So with all that said, I'm going to turn it over to Phil to get us started.
Sure. So I'm going to talk about some of the technology pieces and some of the things that we've seen over the past few weeks. And the first thing I want to talk about is your audience. So right now you have an audience of one, and that one audience is the camera. So as you're presenting, I think early on what we did is we said, well, do we make it look like church always was and act as if there's a full room? And after a while, it was kind of like people know there's not a room there. So if you're acting like there's a full room, we really don't know who you're talking to. So acknowledge the camera. From a tech side, if you have multiple cameras and camera operators, maybe you need to find a way that they flag each other to say, hey, I'm the camera that's live. Or if you have tally lights that light up, work with the pastor, or pastors work on what's a communication thing so I know which camera to look at. Some of that could just take some pre-planning. I also think you just need to pace for interactivity. I noticed this early on where a pastor would say, okay, now let's do the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Are you expecting me to participate or not? So if you want me to participate, then do the Our Father who art in heaven, just like we would normally do it in the church. And it may mean that you need to have someone else sitting there in the service, in the congregation audience who can help you pace that out. Also for, I'll get to tech in a minute. Also for interactivity, if you need to have a call and response. So if I'm going to say something, what is the appropriate amount of time to wait? So either saying that in your head or have a few people out in the congregation that can be saying that back. That'll help lead your congregation. It's important for your people to also be welcomed to participate. I know that when I watch it at home, there's the dog is there and the kids are ramming around. And are we standing and singing? Are we praying? Invite your congregation, your audience to do those things. From a tech perspective, really quick, have good lighting. This is a thing that most churches maybe haven't thought about. They have natural light in their room. They have a big stained glass window in the back. And now when they're shooting on camera, the camera doesn't handle light the same way the eye does. Or I've seen some who are having a more intimate Bible study or church service in their home, and right behind them is a big glass window, which is beautiful, except the camera can't read that. And now you look like a silhouette. So now may be a time to think about what do we need to do to knock out some lights? How do we make this scene look better? And we've got a website, churchonline.next or churchnext.online. And we're going to be posting some tips and tricks and some other videos, right?
You want to be our tech guy.
Hey, your team's on here, Adam. Be nice.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
You're doing an amazing job. I'm going to post some videos. So some people have made some really good videos online that you can take a look at for some of these things.
Yeah, and I do appreciate too, Adam, or Phil, as I've looked at that stuff, that you do a good job of saying, here's how you could do it, because I don't know about this stuff. Like, that's why I ask you questions. But the simplicity of like, how do I fix that light that looks bad? I don't know that looks bad, but you've got some pretty good simple stuff. So check that out.
Yeah, and there's a video I'm going to add up there on lighting. There's a guy who took like this ugly room and how he'd lit like a light from the outside and tons of lights on the inside to get the aperture right. And there's a lot of tips and tricks. And rather than go into all that here, I'm just going to post resources you can find online. Okay. Next, good audio, having an external microphone. Microphones do pretty well. Like in these webinars, we've been getting used to Zoom, so we're pretty forgiving with how video looks. But if you're in a room that has air conditioning and maybe you're in your office and outside there's people walking through and a copy machine going on, you need to have some type of a microphone. So I'll post some resources on the website there. But is there a lavalier microphone or your headset microphone or something you can use to get better audio into that camera, irregardless of what camera is, whether it's an iPhone or a professional camera? In an upcoming episode, I'm going to talk a lot about mixing for broadcast versus mixing for the room, and how do we do both when we get back live, and how do we do that right now so that our room isn't super loud and our broadcast is super quiet. So we'll talk about that in a future episode. And then good framing, rule of thirds. I've seen some great work and I've seen some really poor work. Recently, we shot a video and we had 4 cameras, 3 of them very professional, high-dollar cameras, and an iPhone 11 Pro. And the guy who was editing the video came back and said the iPhone was by far the best looking camera right out of the box. So it is a very good camera, but do you know how to frame a shot? And I have a couple videos. I know you're not going to be able to really copy down these URLs, and I'll post these on the website as well. But there are a couple of really good YouTube videos on rule of thirds, used all the time in photography, but then I tried to find some more specific to videography. So I'll have those posted on the website as well.
Thanks. And I'm going to jump in here just for a second. I want you guys to know we are seeing your questions and your comments, and we're going to address those. Some we'll address as we kind of go along, and some we'll address at the end. Just want you to know that we are seeing what you're saying, and appreciate you chiming in.
Yeah. And Leah,
unless you're being sarcastic toward me, and then we don't appreciate that. I just want to
Leah and Adam, if you see one that you want to represent live, just go ahead and do it right now.
All right.
Fine. Okay. Next piece, streaming destinations. So I'm going to assume most of you are streaming. You probably came up with something right away to said, we have to stream. What do we do? And we went to Facebook and we went to YouTube. Some of the problems with those is they have a ton of capacity and they're used to that. But we have heard of problems with delays in the audio, video cutting out. And then the big thing is copyright. So those places use algorithms. They don't have live people right now reviewing all your streams. I've even heard of streams being shut down for saying the Lord's Prayer. So they have algorithms that are looking, and they could turn you off. So some other ideas may be good. Live stream doesn't do that. Vimeo, I don't know for sure, but I don't think they have those algorithms in there. Living is One is a service I want to talk about. They provide their own encoders, and they've been doing this for churches. And the nice thing about their network or their encoder is that it does a lot of buffering beforehand, something like 90 seconds of buffering. So it's going to make sure that even if your internet was shut off for a minute, it's always going to be delivering a good stream. So they're one that's they tout themselves as a rock solid service. And those I've talked to who use it say that it's been phenomenal. No dropouts, nothing. Some others, Media Fusion, Stream Monkey, Lightcast, Boxcast. You'll have to do some of your own evaluations. Some of these offer Roku channels and Apple TV channels. So you'll have to do a little bit of homework on those, but those are some alternatives to Facebook and YouTube. And a lot of them will rebroadcast to Facebook and YouTube as well. So you're not missing out on those places. Aggregation, one service I thought of as Church Online, which will allow you to have some chat features and some rebroadcast. But it's not a serving platform per se. Now I know they had some problems early on. I'm thinking that's been fixed. I know some churches where the management platform went down right after COVID, but I think they've worked out some of those issues. So that may be a platform to use. And then I want to talk about communicating your stream. So make sure you're communicating all your times. And if you've changed things, I know Adam at your church, you guys would do like a more traditional service and then some more contemporary. That was changed in COVID. So how do we communicate that? How do we communicate what service times, where they're going to be, what style of worship it is? I know at our church, we do 7 services across 3 campuses on a typical Sunday. Well, right now we're doing 3 services, and what are the times for which campus? Mm-hmm. And then make sure that's on your website and social media. I've seen a lot of social media, and then sometimes I go to a website and it's kind of hard to find where the streaming worship is.
Right.
Give the audience a way to engage. Right now, people are feeling pretty disconnected. So can they chat? And if they're chatting, do you have a way to be looking at those chats? Right now, as I'm presenting, I can't be reading all these comments at the same time. So do you have another person who's sitting there watching the chats, can respond, can take notes if someone needs prayer or something? How are they engaging? this last weekend, we did something kind of fun where we said before the service, hey, use this hashtag, tweet in pictures of you worshiping today. And then during the offering time, we had a scroll of live pictures of people in their house worshiping. So we're going to try that again in a couple weeks, but that was kind of a fun way to engage people. Or I've seen a lot of people doing the Bible readings, and those are being sent in, and then they're including those in the worship. So it's not just the staff all the time, but members of the congregation being able to participate in worship. All right, next piece here. If there are technical problems on Sunday morning, we've been doing disclaimers. Hey, we know that Sunday morning is really full. Maybe it doesn't work for you, but right after this service, you can rebroadcast it. My family, we get together on Sunday evenings at 7:00 and watch 2 of the worship services. So have a way that outside of live, they know where they can go to see the rebroadcast of the service.
You watch 2 full services?
It depends. We either watch 2 full services. We'll watch one in the sermon, and the other one, the girls say, hey, we want to hear the songs from the contemporary one. So we'll go through and find some songs and not watch all the way through. It depends on the evening and how stir crazy people are.
Right. You're just kind of overachieving a little bit. That's why.
A little bit.
Asked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Online offerings. I'm assuming most are doing online offerings, but I think it's very important to have some way that people can give online, especially right now when offerings have probably taken a dip. So I think you have to have a way to do that. I think that text to give makes it easier than having to navigate to a website, especially if someone is on their phone and they have to pull away to a different website. Now are they going to find your stream again and they miss something? So maybe text to give is a good way of doing that. And if some of you have a service that you like for text to give, if you can post that, that'd be great. As we talked, ironically, our congregations aren't doing that. But if there are some services you like, please share those, and then we'll put those on the website as well. And then another option is auto draft. I mean, I've been doing auto draft for my giving for years at the church. So when this thing hit, I didn't have to think about doing anything differently. It may be a good time to push that now. And then people post-COVID are kind of in that rhythm and they're still giving. And then another thing you may want to talk to people about, we had some folks who gave big gifts later in the year. They're moving up to the front of the year to help us through that time. You know, I'm sure you probably have some financial people, but maybe talk to some folks about that, because right now, one thing is it's probably costing us more because we're paying for technology and streams and stuff that we weren't doing before. So we have less revenue coming in and more expenses.
A couple of comments over here, folks are talking about ones they're using. And I see Venmo, there's folks that are using that for text to give. There's people that are using Subsplash. I've not used that one, but yeah, so there's lots of options out there. I mean, the thing that's interesting is a lot of things we could talk about. You can go Google and find 13 people to talk about it. So we just want to say, hey, here's what we know is out there. And Phil, if you want to do the setting expectations, and then I've got a couple of other questions that have come up on the stream that I'm going to ask you to address for us now.
Yep. Dan Hauser's pretty he's pretty responsible. So I think Subsplash, is probably a good recommendation. I don't know Dan well, but some other people have said that.
I know Dan very well.
Oh, do you?
Yes. I'll vouch.
My bad.
Someone else just said push pay. There's another piece. So there you go.
Setting expectations. Pre-recording is great to minimize potential problems. One thing I noticed right away is that churches who had never streamed before were all of a sudden trying to go live, like exactly 8:30, we are going live. And that caused a lot of anxiety and stress. And the churches that had been streaming forever were all of a sudden pre-recording and saying, wow, this kind of made our lives easier. We can pre-record this stuff, play it back on Sunday morning. We don't all need to be there. If there's a technical problem, we can fix it. So right now, pre-recording could be a good thing until you get the rhythm and get the bugs worked out. With the pre-recording, I'm going to suggest don't overdo your production. I see some churches out there doing incredible productions where, I love the mashups. I think they're phenomenal. I've seen churches where and maybe some of you are doing this, where trying to abide by the rules, they bring in every musician in one at a time, record them to a click track with multiple angles, send away those tracks to some Nashville producer who's not working right now, who does a great mix. A video editor spends all week mixing in all these great angles and cable cams and incredible stuff. But what happens when we all come back live and we can't do that and our production quality takes a big bump? And people are we're setting an expectation of this level of production. And maybe that's how you're going to do it in the future. But I think right now it's important to think about, are we training volunteers? Are we training our technical staff? Are we training the band and the pastors on how we're going to do this live? We don't know if we have 3 months we're going to be doing it this way, or if in 2 weeks, all of a sudden we can go live again. How are we preparing for sustainability?
Could you two speak to like live versus recorded? So like my church right now is just pre-recording, mixing them, and then putting them up, and then people can watch whenever. But I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that, because there's several questions about, is it worth going live? Should you record earlier and then publish at the time? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, what we're doing is we are with our schedule, we record once every other week. So the first service goes live, and then we're recording for the next week, and we have a week off. But we record from A to Z. So we just hit record, we go. We're not chopping it up. And the only real reason for that is because I want to have a rhythm, because the church decided early on, we are now streaming. We have not been streaming in the past. We are now streaming post-COVID. Okay, so let's figure out all these bugs right now, get everybody used to that. So on day one post-COVID, we're just doing the same thing. We know how that's done. We're not having to shift gears again.
Okay, and then you post them though at certain worship times, or like play them live, or how does that work?
Yeah, so then we have them at the certain worship times. So I think the 8 a.m. is the traditional, and then 211 Yankee Hill is at 9 o'clock, and then at 11 o'clock is 211 Sumner. So right now, the service we use doesn't allow us to like automate that. So we actually have a person who sits there on a laptop, either at home or at church, and hits that file at that time to play it out.
Okay. How about you, Adam? What are you guys doing, and why are you making the choice you are?
We just decided not to have church in general. So no, this is a conversation that we've been having, because our online stream week after week, our online production gets better and better because we're getting better at it. Right. And then how we go back to doing live services that are streamed, that is a conversation that we have to have. So in some of the coming episodes, I know we're going to talk about what can you carry over. So some of that might be cameras, positions. Phil touched a little bit about the budget. And those are all things that we're going to want to look at. But, we've been streaming for a long time, even before COVID. So we were in a good place to just pick up and go. We do stream at the times of the services, but then we also have replay times throughout the week, and then they go on demand on our YouTube channel and Vimeo channel and some other things. So I think making it available as often as you can with on demand, but you certainly want to have it at the time that you normally have church, whether you're doing live broadcast or you're airing your pre-recorded product.
Yeah.
Some people get real sticky when you start moving around their church time,
And I'm seeing some questions here, and I'll get to those in just a second. But don't burn out your volunteers and staff right now. I know some people, some of you who are maybe on the Church Sound Media Tech Facebook, these guys are Saturday night, 3 a.m. with these huge timelines, trying to get everything done and everything edited. And people are coming up with new ideas. What can we do? And throwing it at them at the last second. And we don't want to burn out our volunteers right now, especially if we're looking for sustainability in the future. I think people were really hyped, really excited in the beginning, and now it's getting to be work. It's getting to be a little bit difficult and monotonous, and just make sure we're not burning people out. Maybe now is a good time to be training up some people. And one thing on a side note is I have a video on the Church NeXt website that a buddy Heath Marnin and I did, talking about some things that you can do in this downtime, maybe with your volunteers, to kind of clean up your tech and do some sprucing up, some refocus lights, some repairs and things maybe during this downtime.
Yeah, one of the things Jeffrey Mines just posted in the chat, depending on your sound console, can you do some work on a separate broadcast, blah, blah, blah. There was another question about, do I need 2 mixers or whatever? The short answer is yes, you can do some pre-work, and no, you don't need 2 consoles. That goes to, is it great to have 2 consoles? Sure. but can you make it work with one? Absolutely. There's a lot of ins and outs. I see a lot of people are asking a lot of specific questions on the tech side of things. So I know our email addresses are going to be up here later on. Also, they're available on the church NeXt.online website. And some of those things may be better addressed one-on-one because our situations are so different. So, but yeah, and I'm going to speak to some of these questions as well here in a little bit. Sorry, didn't want to.
No, that's great. And I think the audio piece, that's something that I'm going to talk about in a future episode here. I think, Adam, you covered a lot. Do you need broadcast board and a house board? No. The tech behind that is you'd use like an aux bus or something to mix that. But we will talk about how to do that well and gain structure and those things. And maybe I'll even try and write something about that. But I want to hit that up next week or whenever our next webisode is. So we're going to talk about future tech in your ministry. Now that we filled the gap for COVID-19, people are now looking and saying, okay, we got a system, we got up and going, but we know this is not our long-term solution. I think in the first week of COVID, we sold 4 camera systems to 4 different churches across the country. And now they're saying, okay, well, we're finding some things that we don't know if this is what we want long-term. Well, it wasn't your long-term system. Those can be very expensive. This was a get you through the stopgap. Now it's time to start looking forward and saying, what are we going to do if we're doing streaming from here on out? What technology do we need? So in the next episode, I want to talk about video switcher options, audio, live broadcast. So I'll get in a little more depth of what different switchers do and how to choose, because switchers can range from $1,000 to $40,000. But make sure you're getting the right thing for your needs. And then we're going to talk about budgeting for the future. What does this mean if we're going to be moving forward? So that's what I have right now. I don't know if there's some specific questions you guys think I should tackle right away, or do we?
Why don't we circle back to those? And because I'm wondering if some of those Adam might address even in his what he's got to share about kind of hospitality pieces. So.
Okay.
Adam Countryman.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see so many of you interacting. I just right off the bat, there's a question here about the chat. I think, what you put on the chat really isn't up to you. It's up to your people and what they're asking and saying. I know that we do a lot of interaction on our chat during COVID. We've had our entire staff basically on there saying hello, good morning, taking prayer requests. The more you do it, I think the more engaging it is. And I think if it's distracting, people can hide the chat window. So we can't control people's behaviors and we can't control their responses, but they have an option to hide that should they want to. So just to quickly address that. Okay, so just a few things here. Phil took so much time that I'll try and go a little quicker. He gets a little verbose, which is fine. It's important.
Sorry.
Verbose. Okay. Yeah. So hospitality is a huge piece of worship. In the Center for Worship Leadership and in the Wally groups, we talk a lot about the 3 cores. Core 1 being the theology of worship. Core 2, the leading aspect of worship and what we do. And then core 3, the toolbox. How do we do these things? What tools do we need to do them? So what I'm going to talk about right now, if you're familiar with those, is more core 2 kind of pieces. So one thing, just right now, as we're all online, I think it's really important. Don't make assumptions. Okay. Now this seems a little bit obvious, but it's not obvious to all as we go and watch other people's streams. This is not your congregation that has just walked in off the parking lot, right? You want to assume that there are people there who have not been in your building. They don't know you, right? So one of the things that you may get some flack for, but early on, I just started introducing myself every time. And I do that live in the room or online. And I tell all of our worship leaders the same thing: introduce yourself. And this is really hard for senior pastors because they operate inside this idea that they're leading their flock. Well, their flock grows and those people change and differ, but they may be inviting people who don't know who you are. What does it hurt to say, Hi, I'm Jeffrey Mines. I'm the pastor of Holy Cross. We're so glad you joined us today. Don't make assumptions that people know who you are or what you're doing. I think that's really important. And we should always be doing that, right? So whether or not there's people in the room or not, remember that if you're not addressing guests, you're assuming there are none there. And that circular idea is then you will not have guests there. So we constantly want to be looking at that. A simple welcome online goes a long way. Acknowledge where we are and what we're doing. So, we have a kind of an old saying, like, people never forget they're in church when they're in church. People aren't going to forget that they're in line or online. Sorry. Well, they may be in line too. Who knows where they're watching, but they don't forget that they're watching on a computer, because about the time you go into the prayers, some kid's going to scream or your dog's going to bark or the Amazon guy's going to ring the doorbell. So they're not going to forget. You're not fooling anybody. This isn't a Scooby-Doo episode. So just address it from the outset, and just remember, you're not fooling anybody. There's a great example, and we put this on the Church Next online website. During the week, I think the second week of when all the churches were doing this, North Point had their online service start with Andy Stanley standing in front of the musicians. It was such a great introduction, because you just realized, oh, wow, this is very different. And he just addresses the fact that, hey, this is going to be what we're doing for a while. And he said, Tim and Julie and Ron back here, they're going to play some songs. And we want you, to know that you're welcome here, blah, blah, blah. This becomes a very welcoming piece. This is a very hospitable thing for you to do. Now, your church members, they may go, why is he introducing himself? Like, we know who he is. Well, it's not for them, right? That little part's not for them. It also doesn't hurt them. So that's not something that that we need to necessarily be worried about. I don't find it distracting. Sometimes I like to ask myself, like, would I find that distracting, or would I find that misleading, or whatever? And that may not be the best litmus test. So ask some other people too. But for me, that's kind of where I start. Okay. So what'd I say? Oh yeah.
Make assumptions.
Don't make assumptions. So the next thing would be, what do you want people to do? So this is something that came up on the chat here a few times. Imagine you invited people over for dinner. Okay. You were having a dinner party, and you open the door and they're standing there, and then you just walk away. So they're just standing at the door. And you just are like, hi, and then you walk away. You don't invite them in. You didn't tell them where to put their coats, or where they could sit down, or where the restrooms, are, or anything. So all of a sudden, this great thing that people have been looking forward to, that they got dressed up for, that they planned, that's been on their calendar, that they got a babysitter for, they show up, and now they're like, what the heck? And the reality is, it doesn't matter how good the food is, because by the time they get to the table for food, they're ready to go home. Like, they don't care, because you haven't told them anything. Tell people what you expect of them. Here, let me take your coat. Come on in. Let me show you around. If you need to use the restroom, here's where the restroom is. The same thing goes for online. That would go for our churches inside the room. The problem is most of us weren't doing this good inside the room. And so now it's exacerbated online, if that's a real word. I've heard people use it. I don't really know, but I think it is.
Our pastor even said, like, you can hit the chat icon right up here.
Yeah.
No.
Right. Yeah.
Window. And that's going to look like.
Yeah. Or to exactly earlier. And if you think that if that's distracting you, you can click that off. It's cool. Like, just let people know, give them some permissions.
Yeah. People love to get permission to do things. Like they love that. It's like, oh, thank goodness. Okay, fine. Well, if I'm going to walk away, imagine going to your favorite band's concert. The permission you get to use the restroom is when they say, we're going to do a new song now. Half the audience gets up and goes to the bathroom. It's a permission giving thing. That's what they're telling you. We're going to do a new song. And the reason we told you that is because if you're going to miss something, this is the thing we want you to miss right here. We battle this in real life churches, and but we battle it a lot online, especially. This is especially true in the traditional world. So we've been seeing a lot of churches live streaming their traditional services, or maybe they only have traditional services, the divine service or whatever kind of style they're doing. And this is a really hard thing for our tradition to grasp, because we've built this amazing worship experience on the divine service, and we make a lot of assumptions that people know what the creed is and that people know why we do the Lord's Prayer. So if you're a visitor and somebody says, and now we pray the prayer that you've taught us. Well, I don't know it, right? I'm a visitor. So God has passed me up because he didn't teach me this prayer. I don't know what you are talking about. The same thing goes with, do you want them to read with you, right? Somebody asked this on the chat earlier. Do I ask people to read along? Yeah, you ask them to read along. Somebody said earlier on the chat, should you invite people to stand for the gospel? I think that's fine, because here's the reality. They're going to stand or they ain't, right? And you're not going to know. So what difference does it make? If you're used to inviting them to stand during the gospel, invite them to stand during the gospel. That's a really important thing. I think that's great. If they stand, they stand. If they don't, they don't. Congratulations. Chances are they're still going to go to heaven if they didn't stand during the gospel, but that's not for me to say. This isn't a theological conversation. So, but that's an important thing to address. And I think it's an important thing to address in the traditional world in general, right? Not just online, but it certainly is highlighted online when there's no congregation saying the words back to you. There was a question about this earlier too, with the hymns, you're used to doing the hymns with your organ. So the organ's playing and you're used to feeling like that, the organ volume rise and the kind of low end in the room get a little bit more present as you're about to sing. That's not true online, especially if people are just watching on their phone or on their computer speakers. There's no dynamics there. If you're just using an iPhone, which is fine, there's no dynamic range there. So something that I think shouldn't be afraid to do is have somebody singing along. What's the problem with that? Now, in some traditional settings, early, pre-COVID, when I would talk about this, people would say, well, then it just looks like a performance. I don't feel like I have to sing. That may or may not be true in your environment. But the reality is that helping people know when to sing is not a problem that's not a discussion we should be having. We want people to sing along. We want them to know when to sing. We want them to know the song, especially since a lot of our churches have gotten away from the hymnal and we're putting lyrics on a screen. They may have forgotten or never heard this hymn before. So to have somebody leading that is a good thing.
I'd say, back to your point earlier about visitors and whatnot. So like, for instance, with our family, we've got neighbors just like a couple doors down. They lived here 4 years. We've invited them to church. We've had them for dinner. Like, they know that we're Jesus people. And they have been church people, but have not gone to church in 4 years. So they texted us for Easter and said, hey, are you guys having a service? We kind of want to do that. And they did it. And they, afterwards stopped me as I was on a walk and like thanked me and whatever. My point is, these were people that have not been to church in at least 4 years, and they don't know the songs. And do I love, because sometimes I'm the song leader person on the video, which I don't love that role, but I'll do that for my neighbors so they can hear the song. It's worth it. Even though it might feel a little awkward on the end of the musician or whatever, it serves the person sitting on the couch or at their dinner table.
Absolutely. And we've heard stories like this over and over, and you probably have too, right? Where we had a lady say, my husband's never been to church with me, and her and her 2 kids have been coming to church for years. He's never come, but he's been watching now because he doesn't have to leave the house and he's looking for something to do because he's bored. So he tunes in, he watches online with his family now. And last week he even reminded them, hey, we should try and catch the service today. That's a big deal. That's a big deal that this guy has the potential now and the possibility that maybe he becomes the spiritual head of his house. I mean, that's enormous, all because you decided that you were going to stream or because you had to stream because you couldn't have people at your church. Imagine what would happen if we never had COVID. What would happen to that guy? You know, those are things that we can ponder. And to Phil's point earlier, you know, being very explicit with our instructions. So if you have a prayer request, there's a button at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Right now, we want you to go ahead, click that button. Don't worry, it's not going to shut down your stream, but prayer requests are important to us. Assure them that that'll be the case. The last thing I wanted to mention quickly before Leah takes over is quality. You would not invite your friends, your neighbors, or maybe even your family to something that sucks, right? So it's not like it is with food, right? Like with food, we go like, oh, this is terrible. You should taste this. Oh, it's awful. I don't know why we do that, but it's human instinct. Like we're miserable. You should be miserable too. But I think this is not like what we're talking about when it comes to our church presentation. So, you know, we're not saying, come check out our church band. They're really bad. You're going to just be like, oh my gosh, they're so terrible. Or come see this movie. It was awful. You know, we don't do that. So put in the time now, especially if you're new to streaming, and to also be thinking about the future and the quality and execution that you're trying to achieve, because that quality is going to be good. Now there's a balance there, right? To what Phil was saying earlier. If you're producing the Grammys online every weekend now, and you go back to having regular church services, what does that do to your credibility, to your operations? Now you've got events that are on your campus and you don't have time to edit the pastor's sermon video that he stopped 14 times in the middle of, you know, to make a change. He doesn't have that luxury live. So how do we do that? The last thing I wanted to say is just embrace what you have, right? So, and this goes for a lot of us, even outside of this online world and COVID thing. But if all you have is an acoustic guitar player, don't strive to be the church down the street. Don't strive to be, because right now we're all down the street from each other. So if you go, well, Saddleback's doing this and North Point's doing this and Central Christian and Life Church and blah, 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 blah. Well, those churches have been doing online forever and they've got it down to a science, and they have whole congregations watching on a screen somewhere in the world. That's not necessarily something that you need to immediately jump to. So if what you have is an acoustic guitar, figure out how to make that really good. You know, what songs can you do that are really good? Go watch a bunch of the old MTV Unplugged concerts. A lot of you on the chat are probably way too young to remember that, but it was a great series where bands who were normally full bands with big things were, oh, somebody's coming in. Nope. Goodbye. Love you. That's my daughter. Oh boy. Anyway, at least she knelt down. We've told her, you know, stay offline. Just fly under the radar. So, you know, a bunch of those things were these big rock bands like Kiss did an unplugged thing. It was one of my favorite ones. And Paul Stanley had a great quote in that. He said, if a song doesn't sound good on an acoustic guitar, it's just a crappy song. And I think that's a great rule of thumb. You know, pick things that will work and have great quality with what you have, instead of trying to do this lofty thing and then falling short every time.
Yeah. And I think even to stuff like if all you have is an iPhone, use it.
Yeah.
Put it in one spot, make everybody work to that one camera and just do it, instead of trying to go, okay, now we're going to do 13 things, but simple.
Right.
Because people
just turn your camera sideways, for crying out loud.
Yeah. And how many people are watching more than one church? So I didn't say that. More than one service a weekend. I mean, there's people that they might watch Life Church or whoever, but they're also going to watch you, and they're going to watch you because you're their church, not because you're better or your technology is better. It's you're my pastor, you're my people. I'm lonely for my people. So don't worry so much about having to compete as just doing it well so you communicate well. I think that's huge.
Yeah. There is no standard for DB levels, guys. Those of you who are asking.
There is for broadcast.
Oh, for broadcast.
For broadcast. So that's one thing I've seen people talking about that, and I'll get into that next week. They were saying, how do we, and we've had these conversations, how do we do tech support for 2,000 people out there watching our stream on anything from an iPhone to a Dolby surround sound system? And it's difficult. And you were talking about the Grammys. Often a lot of these live events sound horrible. I mean, let's just remember, when we watch live events on TV, they usually aren't all that great, you know. But as long as we're providing a broadcast signal, and Jordan was talking about this, he said they normalize at -6. We're getting really techie here. So if we're using colors, I say always be in the yellow, dip into the orange, don't stay in the green, never hit the red. So in your church with your sound system on, you may just have this much audio on the soundboard, and that's loud enough in the room. That's not loud enough for broadcast at all. So maybe now's the time to turn off your amplifiers, turn off your speakers in the room. You don't need them, and make sure you're getting a good quality signal going out. And we'll address that later. I've been trying to respond to questions as they've been coming up as much as possible. One thing I wanted to mention is outside of worship, how are we streaming other things? Bible studies, Vacation Bible School. We did a fundraiser gala for a school that said we're missing our biggest fundraiser. How do we do this? Graduations, whether that be your school graduation. What are other events and things that we can be doing virtually online? And churches have technology to do this, and we have streaming capability. So it could even be something that we're able to offer to other organizations in the church or even outside of the church. They may not, a company, a nonprofit may not have the equipment to do this, but your church does. So now could be a time to use that expertise for others.
Yeah. Excellent.
Well, that's all I had to address for today. Obviously, there's a lot of specifics and some other things out there, and your situation is not everybody's situation. Those of you who know me know I'm a music guy. I'm colorblind, so I'm not going to be running the audio on our board, obviously, if it's all color coded. So, but that's why we know people like Phil, so that we can.
Comment here from Mark. He says, one thing I remember reading at the start of this is no matter who you are, put a service online, even if is an Elevation in Saddleback, they want to see your church's pastor. They want to hear from their pastor. I heard some other people being concerned about how does a church with a small budget compete with the big churches. I think we may see some shuffling of the deck. People are getting exposed to new churches. But if you're a smaller church, how are you creating intimate spiritual moments with your congregation? What are the things that you're providing? Maybe it's really nice to just have your pastor sitting in his office talking to you about the Bible, sharing concerns, responding online. Those are things that some of the really big churches can't do when you're talking about thousands and thousands of people. I saw one person where they just do their whole church. They're like, we have 25, 50 people who come on a Sunday. We do the whole church service on Zoom and everybody interacts. That's something for me. I'm at a big church, but I love stuff like that. Big churches can't really do that. So there are some advantages you have. Whatever you do, just do it really well.
Amen. Good stuff. So I'm going to chat a little bit as we kind of wrap up, because we do want to keep this to an hour or so. But a little bit more about how do you pull this stuff off. So Phil and Adam are both like people who know how to make it sound good, know how to make it look good. They get the tech. That's not where I'm at necessarily, but where I'm at is how do I help people do the work together? So I guess what I'd say in general is this: the problems that you had as a staff or with your volunteers and with communication that you had before COVID are now just more amplified. They're not new problems. The issues that you're having with getting stuff done is not new. It's just looks different, or it's more obvious. And so I think one of the opportunities that we have right now in the midst of this season of ministry, especially in the now, is to say, what can we spend time on now? What can we learn to do well now that's going to benefit us now and into the future? And I really think
I thought that said why teams stay suck at first. I had to really, but I was like, oh, well, it's still appropriate. I'm just, okay.
Thanks, Adam.
You're
That's
welcome.
so good. So I'll just start with this. I think there's 4 reasons why teams can't get stuff done. Before you would walk down the hallway and you'd have a conversation with your coworker and say, hey, I want to change this thing in worship. We're going to do this a little bit different on Sunday. This is how we're going to do the welcome as we've got people coming in, or VBS. Well, now you can't walk down the hall and do that. And so I also happen to be married to a pastor. And one of the things that I am seeing in his world is 5 bajillion text messages and emails to get 2 or 3 little things done that used to be taken care of in a 10-minute conversation or when you pass each other in the hallway. And so what's happening is now that's just amplified, like the issues of communication or the issues of clarity. And so I really think there really are 4 things that are kind of what get us stuck and what keep teams stuck. And I would say they are these right here. One, unclear expectations. Who's doing what? What do you want me to do? How am I doing it? Fuzzy assignments about what those things are that I'm actually doing. Inadequate or confused communication. And then just a lack of deadlines and timelines to get things done. And I think a lot of us have been able to get by with those kind of issues because, well, we work there, or we call or text the person we work with late to get it done. But many of us serve on teams where it's not just staff folks doing this. You've got volunteers that are supposed to be involved as well. And I think they get left behind often in the work and are not made a real part of the team because of these 4 pieces. And I think there's some pretty simple things that can be done to address those. And we'll start with, how do you do better virtual teamwork? And I'd say it comes down to 4 kind of big pieces. And these are pretty practical and pretty simple. But the first one is you need some kind of shared virtual workspace. And when I say workspace, I mean Google spreadsheets or Google Docs. I mean Trello. I mean Planning Center. I mean Asana or Monday.com. There's lots of those places where you can share documents and share your work. And some of those have really cool things too, where you can interface. Here's this piece that I'm working on over here, and I can do. I got bells and whistles to add Adam Countryman, so I know he'll see it. Phil and Adam, what kind of workspaces are you using with your teams, or do you like, since you're doing a lot of virtual?
Go ahead, Adam.
We use the Google suite of stuff, right? Like we use Google Drive. That's where all of our team stuff lives. And our second thing is PCO. I mean, PCO is really been the thing that we have utilized the most, especially when it comes to our plans and our sermon series and our songs and personnel and all that. PCO, Planning Center Online.
In case you don't know, yeah.
Yeah. And then, the Google stuff is great because our team has a drive. It's our worship team drive. And anything that's relevant to our entire team lives on that document. It's editable by the whole team. You can see it. It's always accessible on the app on your phone or on the thing. So that's what we use. And then we have a regular, check in on those things.
We've been using Trello a lot because it's easy to brainstorm and drop in lists and invite people to collaborate.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, there's tons of them out there. The reality is most of you, or a lot of you in the stream, have probably tried 4 or 5 or 6 of them over time. And then what's happened is, well, I don't like this thing about that, or so-and-so never really got on board and didn't really use it. And so then it just became obsolete and didn't really work. Now's the time, if you can get your team to commit to actually working in that virtual workspace and actually putting their stuff up there and keeping it updated. If you can build that now and keep that in the future, think about the hours that you will save, like time-wise. I mean, just amazing. And think about how much better your work with your volunteers will be, or with maybe adjunct staff. Like maybe you have somebody who comes in and they're just there on Sundays and run audio for you. Well, now they can see all the same documentation and all the things that you saw and talked about when you were walking through the hallway. So now is the time to learn those things that maybe people weren't willing to commit to learning before because it seemed like too much or just annoying and they didn't have to. Now's the time to do that, which is kind of cool. Number 2 seems pretty obvious, but have a regular meeting. And when I say regular, I mean set a time and stick to it. So whether maybe it's a 10-minute daily meeting, depending on what kind of work your team is doing. And this doesn't just worship team. I mean, we're talking you're the children's ministry team, or you're the youth ministry team, or whatever. Set a regular meeting, could be daily, could be weekly, could be monthly, but just make sure there's a regular touch point. And I say that for 2 reasons. One, because you need to have conversation, not just communication through the workspace. So that's important. And then the other thing is I'm finding, as a mom who's got a kid who's doing virtual school downstairs, that when the teacher decides to change the Google Hangout by 30 minutes, 10 minutes before it starts, that's a real issue for me, which may seem silly, but we're working hard to try to work all these things together. So if I know that's when that meeting is, then I can work other pieces around it. And the other thing it can let you do is if it's, it's 9:00 on Monday night and you're like, oh man, I need to make sure that I talk to, Joe about XYZ. You can say, oh yeah, but we have a meeting on Wednesday, and can that question wait? Yes, it can. And then you can stop some of that barrage of emails and text messages that then get lost. And people are frustrated because, well, you didn't never do that thing. Well, yeah, but you asked me because you sent me a text message at 10 o'clock at night when I'm putting my kid to bed or whatever. So set a regular meeting, do it. I know it seems obvious, but the obvious simple things are always important. Third one is use some virtual meeting best practices. I won't spend a lot of time on that. If you go to the Church NeXt site, there's like a what's next thing. There's got a couple handouts on there, and one of them gives you some real basic virtual meeting stuff. A couple things are, don't have a meeting if you don't have an agenda and an actual purpose for the meeting, just don't have it. And another one is no more than 90 minutes for a virtual meeting ever. Okay.
Amen.
So 90 minutes is your limit. If you need to have a 3-hour conversation, that's fine. Just say, hey, we're going to do an hour and a half, then we're going to break for an hour, then we're going to come back. Because the things that annoyed you in regular meetings and the things that made you impatient in regular meetings face-to-face are now just multiplied. Like, it's the same issues, it's the same frustrations, it's just multiplied. So don't go more than 90 minutes. And then my third quick thing would be find a platform for your meetings that allows for screen sharing, because that makes doing some brainstorming stuff or mind mapping stuff or looking together at your Google share or your whatever your shared workspace is, look at that together, input the data right there when you're together in real time. It's huge, especially for the guy who never really did the shared document before and now he's being forced to. If you're doing it live, then he can understand it or she can understand it, because it's frustrating when you're the like super tech person and they're not, and now they're trying to catch up. So that'd be the other one. And then the fourth one is just team commitment is key. You really have to have a conversation. How are we going to behave online in meetings? Show up, be on time, listen to each other. Like, you kind of got to say things that probably should have been said before, but now it's a new day. So say it now. Say, hey, Joe, you're always late. I need you to be here. Or do we need to move this meeting 10 minutes? Because we'll move it 10 minutes if we need to. And Joe, if you're on, I'm sorry. Okay. So commit to that, and then commit to the shared workspace, whatever that is. Commit to using it. It's going to make life better for everybody. So those would be my few kind of better virtual teamwork things. There's tons more that I could say, and we can talk more about that in weeks to come. But if you do just these few things, wow, like think about how that's going to shift stuff for you.
Yeah.
That's great. Leah had mentioned the website. So we have put together the Church NeXt website here, and we have the webinar episodes, and this will be rebroadcast, and anything that we see from the conversation that we want to talk about, we'll put in here with this webisode. Our contact information, some quick tips. There's an article we've done about 5 ideas for effective ministry right now, and tech tips during your downtime. And then Leah had mentioned a second ago the planning for what's next. She's got an article up there. And then media examples. And this is just like some things that we've seen around that we mentioned today that are some best practices, some good ideas of things that people have done. So maybe take a look at that. And then we also have some links to some of the Facebook groups, each of our web pages, LCMS Technical Arts, Lutheran Communicators, Wally, some other great resource sites that you can use. And if you guys have anything you want to share with us, we've been putting our email addresses down on the bottom. Feel free to ask questions, and anything that we can post online for everybody, we'll do that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the goal for us really is Jesus has given us an opportunity in this season. So how can we seize it and help each other to do this better for the sake of the gospel? Because that's the point, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And somebody asked, are we going to do this every week? I think we're going to do it at least 2 more times. And we don't know if it's going to be a full week before we do it again, but we'll be posting it on social and all of that good stuff. So yeah, episode 2 is what's next. What's next? Episode 2. Surprise, spoiler alert. And then, but we'll be doing this more too. And obviously your comments are super helpful. And, it helps us know what needs to be addressed if we can help. I just saw that John Jordaning, the Godfather, posted some of the 14 best apps there that we were talking about. So, sharing with one another is a huge help. We can be resources to one another. It's not just what those of us who you can hear have to say.
Great. I don't know. Sorry, go ahead, Leah.
I was just saying, thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Feel free to put your comments on Facebook. We'll try to reply as we can, and visit that churchnext.online website, and we will try and put as much concept up there as we possibly can. Also, feel free to email us if there's something that you see, especially in that section of great practices, great things that people are doing. We'd love to be able to share that.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody.
See you next time.
Have a great day.